Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I am getting to tour a trout farm, and I am with.
Dustin Shore with High Valley Trout Farm, North Carolina.
Well, Dustin, thanks for having me out. For those who don't know, Dustin was one of the guys who was stalking the creek when I was able to follow the trout truck, and it was just a blast to watch. And he invited me down to the farm, and I'm really excited to learn all the ins and outs of the trout farm and chatting about how this got started.
Yeah, I'm Dustin Shore. So I married into the Ziegler family, which is Charlie Ziegler. He founded in 1967 and started building the raceways and everything for the trout tanks for trout. And he got this all started, and I married into the family a couple of years ago. I used to be in law enforcement for Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. I worked in the detention center. So I got out of law enforcement because it's just kind of rough on you and the times are hard. And I enjoy doing trout. I always wanted to do like anything having to do with wildlife.
Right.
And so anyways, I saw the potential here. The farm has been out of commission since 2012, and just started remodeling and fixing things up and seeing the potential of the farm here. So one thing led to another, and me and my wife got a trout lease to be able to continue on with the legacy of Charlie Ziegler. And we just try to do things the best we can the old way, the way he did them, instead of bringing in so much modern technology. But we do want to be more efficient with our discharge of water and different things like that. So anyways, I started after I resigned from the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office a couple years ago as a 9-month temporary at the state of North Carolina, the Setzer Fish Hatchery in Brevard, Pisgah Forest, and really enjoy doing it. So that's when it spiked my interest for the potential of what was under my nose here at the house, and just put in the hard work and effort and bringing it back, restoring it. It's kind of sad. A lot of the private hatcheries are dying out in Western North Carolina, and I think some of them are making a comeback, and it's a different time. But yep, with COVID hitting, I started right in the middle of a pandemic, and that kind of put a monkey wrench in things, and people was asking me, "Are you crazy?" And that's why I work a public job. My days start at 4 a.m. I get up and go down there and feed the trout, clean the tanks, different things like that, get my morning started, and then I get to the state hatchery at 7:30 and work till 4 p.m. And then come home and finish up what needs to be done here, closing time, and that's my day.
All right.
Work, work, work.
So you said it it was previously closed in 2012?
2012, Grandpa had decided he wanted to retire. It was a little more than he could handle. And he closed down in 2012, and it's set ever since. So 2020 is when, the spring of 2020 is when I started hand shoveling out these raceways. They're about knee deep with silt and sand with my own 2 hands. And I had the kids help me, my wife helped me a time or two. It was a family effort. Mm-hmm. It all really came together. But Charlie Ziegler's very happy about the farm being back in commission.
Oh, awesome.
He walks down there and sees the fish, and you just see his face light up.
Oh, that's great.
All his hard work that he did to start it is being appreciated, and that's nice.
So how did he get into it? How did Charlie?
I think he had worked for a farm over in Hendersonville, like a catch-out farm, and he decided that he might want to get into it. I think his boss that he had done some timber cutting for, hauling putwood. I think his name was Bob Polchow, and he had a farm too, a trout farm, and he was, I don't know, you'd have to ask Mr. Ziegler about exactly how it started. But in 1967, he did start the foundations for the concrete raceways and built the hatchery building. And because he did most of the work, if not all of it, so far as construction, I think I read an article in Aquaculture magazine said he saved $400,000 in labor. Yeah,
Just doing it himself?
just because he
All right.
he was a jack of all trades. And you
Yeah.
kind of have to be that way on a hatchery. On a farm, you have
Yeah.
to build your frames. You have to, you got to clean. There's a lot of things you have to hand build because you can't just go to the store and buy it.
Right.
Because aquaculture's kind of that specialty thing.
Mhm.
So a lot of, like for your oxygen tanks, we use things that are probably used for oxygen patients that have oxygen on in the medical field.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things. It's pretty interesting. You have to make your own nets. You can buy a net, but it's cheaper to get in netting material and repair your own nets.
Gotcha.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting trade.
Okay. So I guess what is the full process that we'll sort of be looking over as on the tour? Like what is the first thing that happens? Starting. I guess do you spawn your own fish or do you?
Not as of right now.
Okay.
What I hatched off in December was our first initial hatch. The 1st of December, I think December the 8th was my first hatch. It was rainbows, trout, and golden rainbow trout. And they hatched out a few weeks later. And anyways, they're diploids, so I'm keeping them. And what a diploid is, it means it's not sterile. So I can actually spawn those fish. So that's what I call my future brood stock. So I will take my own eggs. But I actually got the eggs from Utah. They were sent to me. Spring Lake Trout Farm. Robert Judd is his name. And I got them from him. He can do triploid, which is sterile trout.
Okay.
But that's what I'll get in the future is triploid because that's what a customer wants. The reason most customers want, like a catch-out pond is my clientele, like you pay to fish and catch little trout ponds. They're fun. There's one in Morgan Mill in town down there. It's a trout pond, trout fishing pond, where you pay by the pound and then you pay a little extra to get them filleted or whatnot. But you have to keep everything you catch because trout are sensitive.
Right.
So if you throw them back, there's a chance they're not going to live, and then that's wasted the farmer's money. And you can understand where that's a big issue.
Right.
But a lot of my clientele will be that or private streams. I don't do anything public. That's all the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. They do all the stockings for anything public fishing, anywhere public fishing, public streams. I would do more like grow out facilities. What I mean by that is like Sunburst Trout Farms. They grow their trout out for the restaurant business. So I would sell to them if they wanted fingerlings or anybody like them, So it's a pretty neat process. But the first thing that starts is you have to have good water.
Yeah.
For a trout farm. For any cold water fishery, you have to have a good flow of water. So I'm surrounded by the National Forest, Pisgah National Forest. We're on about 323 acres of land here privately. And all of our spring water starts on our property, so it's very clean. I don't have an open water source like most hatcheries to where you get disease or bacteria.
Right.
So when that comes at that natural spring on the top of the ridge, which is about the line of the Pisgah National Forest, so it's protected either way, it comes down into a intake pond, which is behind the hatchery, and I'm going to show the intake there when we walk through, and it comes through the back of the hatchery into the hatchery building. Well, now I have 8 tanks, inside holding tanks, for trout fry, which is, anything under about 4 inches or so, under 6 inches. So it comes through there, and then it runs through there through stem pipes to the outside. So all of my water comes through, it runs to the outside raceways to those fish. So all those flows combine on those 8 tanks coming together. I'm only using 5 tanks as of right now.
Okay.
Because the water flow's been down because of the summer.
Gotcha.
It's kind of been in the drought since, a little bit until we got this last tropical storm came through.
That helped.
So that helped a lot with the trout industry. But what people don't realize is trout are so sensitive. Like even with the rains, it'll stir the silt up, and they don't like that because the pH in the water changes. Everything changes. So you got to constantly watch them. The intake, I have to clean the intake and make sure leaves don't get on the intake and clog that, because when there's no water, they die. They have no oxygen coming through.
Yeah.
So they need that turnover rate of water. They need very clean water.
Yeah.
and it's just amazing how sensitive a trout really is.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. And now my incubators temperature, the lower the temperature, the more the water will hold oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So my incubators are about 56 degrees. When an incubator is what holds the eggs. When I get the eyed eggs in, I put them in an incubator tray, and it is spring fed, and I have it pumped at about 5 gallons per minute, and it goes through what's called a Heath tray, or Amerisource make them now, but the old Heath tray is what everybody knows them by. And it flows through, and it has a nice rotation of water for the eggs so they can have oxygen and form. And an eyed egg, when it comes in, what an eyed egg is you can see the little eyes in it, so they can't ship. They're sensitive if they're green eggs, which are freshly taken. So when you put them in the trays, the water, keeps oxygenated and circulated, should I say. And the one issue you have is when the eggs are in there, some of the dead eggs, if you can't get every single one out without hurting other eggs. So fungus will build in any water that you have. It don't matter how clean it is, fungus will build. So you formalin treat them with a formalin drip for about 15 minutes, and I think it's 475 milliliters of formalin, and you do that for 15 minutes out of the chicken feeder.
Okay.
Yeah. And you do your water, and you put 475 milliliter and then fill the rest of the chicken feeder up with water, and it dilutes it enough to get your parts per million correct.
Okay.
And then it treats it, and that'll kill any fungus that may want to get on the eggs. And you do that until about the day before you can tell when the eggs are starting to form a little bit, or deform a little bit. They're about to bust out and hatch.
Okay.
So when they hatch, it'll be about 3 weeks. It could be 1 week. It depends on the water temperature, but it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for me because the water temperature is 56 at a constant outlet spring all year round. So I could hatch every 3 months. I could put some in the incubator, the eggs in the incubator, and then I can hatch, and then 3 months later I have a 3-inch fish.
Okay.
So they'll be sack fry when they go from hatching out of the egg to sack fry. They'll have a yolk sac on their belly, and they'll absorb that, and it'll take them about 3 weeks to absorb that.
Gotcha.
And then I'll drop them down into a trough. So they'll be in that trough, and they'll be in the swim up stage then, and then I put them on starter feed, and a little bit at a time, and you'll do about 8 feedings a day because their metabolism is so high.
I bet, yeah.
And it's just a little bit, 8 times a day, 8 feedings. I usually do once an hour.
Okay.
And when I'm not here and I actually am at work, I have them on a belt feeder. It's a time feeder, and I know the 8-hour mark. That's once an hour, and I know how to kind of put it in there. And I'll show those. I have a few of those. It's on a timer, on a clock, on a conveyor belt. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And anyway, so then you can get about 1 inch a month of growth on a fish at the right circumstances. And right now, their metabolisms are pretty high because the temperature gets higher. But the problem is, you can only feed them maybe when they get over the 6-inch mark, like 2% of their body weight. So you get the overall body weight of a tank of fish, and then you can weigh out the percent, like out of that weight, 2% of that overall weight. And then you feed them that. As they get bigger, it's 1%. And the reason it goes down, you can feed a fish, keep feeding a fish will eat, but they only absorb so much at one time, one feeding. And another issue is when your water temperature, their metabolism's wide open, they're wanting to feed and everything at 63 degrees here lately the past few days, but then there's less oxygen in the water because the temperature's higher, so that dissolved oxygen content goes down, and then you could have a crash and they die. So you have to be really careful and know what you're doing. There's science to it. So.
Yeah. So you learned all this stuff from Bobby Setzer Hatchery, or also in Mr. Ziegler?
Between Mr. Ziegler and Bobby Setzer Hatchery, Adam Motacek is the superintendent there. Okay. And he really knows his stuff. He's took me under his wing. I've learned a good bit. And also, I just wanted to mention, I'm no way representing the North Carolina wildlife today. I'm just an individual farmer here. Yep. So I'm talking about my experiences at the Setzer Fish Hatchery, but I'm not representing or anything like that for the Wildlife Commission or acting as a representative. I just wanted to throw that out there. But I do enjoy working there, and I do learn a lot. Those guys know what they're doing. They're very professional. as a state entity, definitely they're top notch. Adam Mochek knows what he's doing. The biologists know what they're doing, and I just figured to learn the right way of doing things in a farm setting, a private hatchery, and an industry where there's some things that could go on that you're probably not supposed to do, that aren't exactly regulated. There's some gray areas. They point me in the right direction, so I know what I'm doing. I'm doing it right. I'm doing it regulation. I'm doing it for the watershed, so it'll be better. There's a lot of things that I have learned, and I really enjoy it. And Grandpa did things the right way, I must say. He had learned from a guy named John DeVore. He was the state hatchery used to be a federal hatchery, actually, before the state come in, and they worked out a deal where the state would take it over. But John DeVore used to be the superintendent there, and he kind of took Grandpa and showed him some things, and he actually was employed here on the weekends. You can't do that anymore. You can't be employed with an entity like that and work in the private industry too.
Gotcha.
That's kind of a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So things were different back in '67.
Yeah.
Back in the '60s and '70s.
Yeah.
But yeah, he came over and he worked here, and he worked alongside Grandpa and showed him some things, and I think he learned some things from Grandpa. They learned together on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Initially talked about doing the introduction in the tour. You had mentioned that Mr. Ziegler was, I think, pretty essential in the privatization or the commercialization of trout stocking in West North Carolina, or
he was one of the key coming up people, businessman, should I say, or farmer in Western North Carolina. He was very essential to the growing because he started here at High Valley Trout Farm. Jeanette Ziegler, his wife, named the farm because of the way the valley lays. It's really high up elevation, but it's just a valley that just lays perfectly in this cove. So they named it High Valley Trout Farm.
Makes sense.
And we're North Carolina. There is a High Valley Farm, not Trout Farm, but High Valley Farm in South Carolina.
Gotcha.
And they actually raise produce and different things. So they're just High Valley Farm. South Carolina is what, if you go on there. But they do trout also.
Okay.
So
that's why you have North Carolina.
Yeah, that's why I say North Carolina.
Gotcha.
So we had to get the permits and everything when we leased it. But he was very key, essential person in the coming up of the trout industry, private trout industry back then. He had High Valley Trout Farm, and then he branched out to Headwater over in Boston Grove, Headwater Trout Farm. And then he had Trigo at one time, and then I think Dick Bragg has that now. And then he had Shoal Creek Trout Farm over in Boston Grove on Shoal Creek. And he had a few trout farms around here. He expanded out, and him and Dick Jennings was, I think, the only and first around, and that's Sunburst Trout Farms over there in Lake Logan.
Right. Okay.
And I think he had a trout farm over near Nantahala or Big Snowbird too. He had a trout farm over there. Dick Jennings did. So him and Dick Jennings and Morgan Mill trout farm over there and fishing pond. Dale and Alfred Owen, I believe, were coming up too. But Grandpa was one of the key guys in this area, and he grew a lot of fish, a lot of pounds, and he actually went and set up a lot of farms across the country. He went to Denmark and helped set up some trout farms over there. I think British Columbia and a bunch of farms. He tells a story about a farm in Kansas that he said it was pretty interesting because they had figured out that you need cold water. So in Kansas, they put the silos, big silos, like corn silos, in the ground, fill them up with water, and it was circular, and raised trout in them. And then had a big catch net when it was time to harvest the fish, and they were wanting a better design. Yeah. Because that was just rough. You kind of had a crane to lift it out. Yeah. So he did go around, and a lot of people asked him questions about the trout industry, and he would go help and set up because he just had a natural knack for it. Yeah. He just he knew what he was doing, had an engineer in mind, and knew with what kind of water was on that property, what they had to work with, what they could do, what their capabilities were. That's awesome. So, yeah, he was in several magazines. I think he was in it's on our Facebook page, High Valley Trout Farm, NC. if you go on there, I posted some articles with Charlie Ziegler there where he got interviewed with, I think it's Our State, or I can't remember. It was in the 90s, and then I think there was one in '83, Aquaculture magazine. He was on the front cover.
Okay.
And John DeVore's right there with him, the federal hatchery guy.
Yeah.
And they interviewed him about the farm and how he got his start. And there's a lot of good information on there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
about how he started out.
Gotcha. So what type of trout do you raise?
Right now, I have golden rainbows. A lot of people know them as golden rainbows.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually called albino rainbows when I bought them.
Okay.
The eggs from Utah Spring Lake Trout Farm over in Utah, Ogden, Utah. And anyway, so I have those. They're interesting. So I'm more of a specialty trout guy here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wanting to do. I want to do brown trout, brook trout, which I have. I want to do the golden rainbows, but I also, if we can get a picture of it somehow, a blue trout, which is very rare.
Sweet.
It's a genetic mutation.
Okay.
I know that sounds funny.
Yeah.
It's a genetic mutation that happens in a hatchery setting.
Yeah.
So over time, it's a genetic flaw, but it's a beautiful genetic flaw.
Nice.
Because it's just a pretty blue trout in
Yeah.
there swimming around with my golden rainbows.
Yeah, hopefully we can
So,
find that. Yeah.
I see him every once in a while when
Yeah,
I
I
feed
remember,
him.
yeah, you had posted the egg, the blue egg, and then it turned out to be a
Yep,
blue rainbow.
yep,
Oh, that's
yep.
awesome. But that one's sterile, the sound, or is that?
I don't know if it would be sterile or not.
Okay.
It may be a mule, what you call a mule. That means that because of the genetic mutation, it may have caused it to be sterile.
Mhm.
But I may be working on a genetic strain if I can.
Okay.
Blue trout. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
They have a genetic strain in England right now. It's called Somerset Blues. And they have their own strain, but they're very secretive about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a industry thing.
Yeah.
And but if I can get enough blue trout over a period of time and can take some eggs from them and do that, yeah, definitely.
Wait, you're buying, I guess, the sterilized eggs. How do they sterilize, or is that something that you do, or?
No, when I buy a odd triploid egg, what they do is they put it under, I think it's 1100 psi of pressure. So there's 4 layers to a trout egg. You can't exactly see it unless it's under a microscope, but there's the outer layer, and then you got the 3 other layers that go all the way down to the yolk, the very center of the cell, should I say, as it's forming. So when it goes under 1100 psi, I think it shaves 2 layers off, which goes down to the chromosome of whether it's X or Y, which would be male or female, which makes it the genetic makeup to make it be able to reproduce. And it's like fixing, a trout from reproducing. It forces an extra chromosome into them that makes them sterile. They still form just like a male and female. The males will have what's called a kype, which is a hook jaw, and the females will just have a regular jaw, which is what you mostly see when you catch trout.
Right.
So when you see that big old knotty hook jaw on a mature male trout, that's called a kype.
Okay.
But they could be sterile. All of North Carolina, the state of North Carolina stocks triploid eggs.
Okay.
They don't want to compete with the native species. So what they stock is sterile. And that's what I kind of want to do. The reason being is if I'm getting a permit from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission to stock a privately owned public water, then I need to be able to do that same practice, because I don't want to embark, or infringe on what they're doing or undo what they're doing, even though I could.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. I want to keep it as by the book as I can.
Yeah.
Now, putting it in someone's pond, people ask specifically for diplets because they want them to reproduce in their pond. And under the right conditions, they can. They have to have rocks on the bottom. They'll have to have sand. They'll have to have clean water coming into like a head of a creek. And it just has to be perfect conditions.
Yeah.
And that's the reason a lot of us exist, trout farmers, is because in a controlled setting, you can have 90% survival rate out of egg hatch. And in the wild, it's maybe 5 to 10%.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
We're around and keeping it sustainable, fishery, so to speak, and it's pretty interesting. I enjoy doing it. It's just it's my passion. I've since I was a kid, I wanted to be like a wildlife biologist or
Mhm.
whatnot, growing up, and got in the law enforcement route and enjoyed doing that. I feel like I've served my country that way, or
Yeah.
my
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, in law enforcement, and it got overwhelming, and it'll mentally wear on you.
I bet.
So this is great compared to law enforcement. I like going out and feeding the fish. It's so peaceful.
Yeah.
They do what you want them to do most of the time. And they behave. I don't have to worry about them just
Understood.
trying to shoot at me.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And I love meeting the customers.
Yeah.
I like going and looking at ponds,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing someone's slice of paradise, and seeing the beauty of their ponds and things like that. And them and their family and their guests can come in and catch a fish, and I
Yeah.
made that happen.
Yeah.
So that's just so cool.
Very satisfying. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yep.
So you let's see. So you get the eggs. You have them, in that filter, getting the oxygenated water. They hatch to the sac fry, and then I guess after they absorb it, they turn into the fingerlings.
Swim up fry.
Swim up
They'll
fry.
be like little fry for
Okay.
a while, and you get an inch a month. So in about 3 months, they'll be a fingerling.
Okay.
A 3-inch fish is a fingerling, so that's about the size of your finger. That's
Okay. Fair enough.
where it came
Yeah.
from.
Do you ever do those trout just stay in one trough their whole life until they're moved, or how? Or do you move to different troughs?
We do.
Or I guess,
what-
or is it
what-
raceways?
Yep,
Raceways or
yep.
troughs?
They
Okay.
eventually, inside, I will put them in a tank. And it's all density based on the gallons per minute of water I can get at a time, and temperature also plays a big part. So let's say I had 10,000 fish in a tank inside, which is a holding tank, and I need 5,000 in that tank. I will split. So what I'll do is I'll go get a sample. I'll get 5 samples, and what I'll do is take and net some fish. I'll crowd them down with a crowder screen. I'll net the fish, weigh them, write the weight down, and then hand count every single one back into the tank. And then let's say I have 10 pounds and 200 fish, and then I'll do that division there. I'll divide that and come out with my number per pound.
Okay.
So I get my overall number per pound, which 5 samples is accurate. You get that down, and do that 5 times, and write that on your paper, and then you've got your number per pound, which could be 70 fish to 1 pound.
Okay.
So when I know that, then I get my overall weight. So I weigh every single fish and put them on the other side of the divider screen. And then I get my overall weight, and I times that by the number per pound. I know about how many fish I have.
Okay. Wow.
So I know how many fish to split out of there. Let's say I might be 5,000 over because the oxygen's not getting great. It's all density based too.
Yeah.
Along with the temperature. If you have too many fish in a tank, they'll start dying.
Yeah.
Because the oxygen,
Yeah.
they don't have enough. So when I split them out into another tank as they grow, I'll do that. That's what I do. I'll start out in one initial tank from the trough, and then I'll go in and weigh them and see where they're at. And I can tell by the way they're acting too, they need to be split. And then I'll split them into another tank, and then I'll split them.
Okay.
I'll have all 4 tanks filled up, and they'll be almost 5 to 6 inches. And you start noticing that the density is getting a little bit too high for them to be inside, so they go outside and they get that combined water coming in, which is more flow. And then they have a bigger, what they call raceway or rearing tank. They go outside, and when they go outside, it's interesting to watch them because they're seeing the sun for the first time.
Oh, wow.
So, and they're seeing your whole body for the first time. Instead of feeding them in the mornings, they're just seeing your waist up.
Yeah.
They're seeing your whole body, so they're a little bit freaked out.
Yeah, I bet.
But and there's a lot to it. Before you split a fish or sample a fish, you take them off feed for a day or two. And the reason being is because there's a big myth on hauling fish. Especially I hear that a lot, stocking for the state. You fed those guys so they wouldn't bite, and that's actually a myth, because if we fed the fish before we haul them, they'll stress out so much, and what they'll do is they'll throw up their food and they'll choke on it because the water's not clean then.
Gotcha.
So before I do any kind of moving around or anything like that, I have to take them off feed for a day or two, and they're definitely hungry when they get
That's
back
why they're
on
always
feed. It's
hitting
pretty
hard.
interesting. Yeah, it's
Gotcha.
interesting.
Gotcha.
But yeah, in the rivers, if you're fishing using the right lure or pond, whatever, then they're gonna bite.
Yeah.
They might be a little stressed out, but they're hungry.
Yeah.
So a little fishing insider. I actually used to follow the stock truck.
Oh, yeah?
And fish. I love to fish. I still love to fish. I don't get the time like I used to fish. But I still enjoy fishing, even though I deal with fish on a daily basis,
Yeah.
24/7. A little fishing insider for you guys out there watching this, maybe fishermen. A trout, a stock trout, should I say, they may like something flashy like a spinnerbait or whatnot, but when you get that dough bait, it's more natural, like what they've been eating, like the trout feed. So if you can kind of mimic that, freshly stocked trout,
Yeah.
it don't take them long to adapt. They'll start eating wild, different things, and that's the reason spinners work. Those trout that you caught the other day might have been holdover trout.
Right.
They
Okay.
could have been, yeah. That's what they call a holdover trout. Is they made it from the last year or months since March when it started stocking or whatnot. And that's the same way for these farm. You know, the dough bait works better because they're used to seeing a pellet come out on a little brown pellet. It's got the protein in it.
Okay. And what color is the pellet normally?
The pellet's usually like a, I don't know, like a Cocoa Puff almost.
Okay.
That's what, you know, like Cocoa Puffs?
Yeah,
The cereal? It kind of looks like that. It's a little grainy looking.
So on stocking day, aim for a dough bait that looks sort of Cocoa Puffish.
Yeah.
And you,
Yeah.
all right.
And
So,
I'm pretty sure taking trout feed and fishing with it, trout pellets themselves in public waters is illegal.
okay.
I think so. Be
Gotcha.
careful doing that. Check your local laws
Yeah.
and regulations.
Yeah.
But like the little dough baits, they make it. I would suggest getting something like a little sparkle in it too. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
They like seeing that glitter and
Yeah.
anything bright, you know, that they can see. They'll come to it, but the scent's good.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. The ones I've been doing past couple videos, they've been rocking it.
Yeah.
They're doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. They will.
So after they're moved outside, what's after that, or just you're feeding until it's time to deliver to a customer?
Pretty much. I have the densities low enough right now that the fish outside that we're going to go see are going to probably stay there until they're really big and they're either going to be stocked out. Well, a lot of those fish are going to go to ponds because they're diploids. They're not sterile. They're not going to go in any streams. A majority of those I will keep probably 50 males and 50 females, and I could probably get quite a few eggs out of that just for what I need here in the future. So it takes 2 years for a trout to come to that maturity stage, you know, to be able to spawn.
Okay.
So to have the eggs and whatnot, and you have to feed them broodstock feed, specialty feed to make sure the eggs develop. It's almost like a woman taking a prenatal vitamin
Fair enough.
for the
That's-
development of
yeah.
the eggs. Yes. Yep. So they actually sell broodstock feed.
Okay.
And, BioBrood by BioOrgan's one of the feeds, and it has the higher protein and nutrition that a trout that has eggs needs, and the males too.
Yeah.
You know, and so you actually would knock them out with Tricane as the agent. You take like a teaspoon of Tricane, I don't know, I guess a 10-gallon tote or 30-gallon tote, something like that. You know, like a tote. And of water, and you put the fish in, and it knocks them out. And when it knocks them out, you get them by the tail, and you call what's called stripping the trout of eggs. So you rub your hands, your fingers down its belly, and squeeze the eggs out of its vent
Okay.
into like a strainer.
Okay.
And then you would do that with the males. You would get the what they call milk in the males, and
Right.
you get the males, you know, sperm out. And it goes in there, and then you mix it up with like a little feather or something, and then wait a little bit, and then you can put them in the incubator trays, and they're green eggs, brand new, and they eye up in about 3 weeks.
And so then the fish will just wake up and resume what they do.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. They rehabilitate. You can put them in like a salt water solution to kind of clean them up, and it helps them with the stress.
Okay.
And another tote, a recovery tote is what they call it.
Okay.
And then they'll go back right into,
Awesome.
and the thing is they can, the males will be ready in a couple days to spawn again, but the females, once the eggs have gone, they've gone, and a lot of problem with buying trout that aren't sterile, even in a pond setting, people don't realize is they get what's called egg lock. So in a stressful situation, in the wild, they would absorb that as protein and food if they don't spawn.
Right.
The females, the eggs, they get so stressed out in a controlled environment, you know, concrete in the densities and things like that, and handling them and things like that. They can't absorb it. So if you have a triploid egg, it's a lot better on them. They're not stressed out.
Yeah.
But they can get egg lock and die. And if you don't get in and strip all your fish of the eggs, which is just painstakingly long, it takes a lot of time. If you had to strip all the fish that you had, then they could, I guess, probably it's kind of 50-50. They could get egg lock and die.
Gotcha.
And you'll see that, and it's sad.
Yeah.
You don't want that. You don't want a bunch of fish dying that you worked hard to raise. Put a lot of time, energy, and money into.
Yeah. This could be an interesting question for, especially for me. But so with your rainbows, your brooks, and your golden rainbows, and brown eventually, or eventually brown.
I have about 100 brown.
Okay.
I didn't have a great egg hatch.
Gotcha.
They didn't turn out so great. I don't know what happened during the process.
Yeah.
But I've probably got 100 survivors of 1,000 eggs that I had.
How can you tell the difference between a male and a female trout?
The female will have like in the background here. I don't know if you can see the trout here. So on this trout, the demonstration would be this is a female because it's more rounded. So a male have that big hook jaw that comes out here. This looks like a big jaw.
Yeah.
So when you catch one, you're like, what in the world is that?
Yeah.
It looks like a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that comment.
I've seen it. I said that looks like a salmon, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. It's called a kype.
Okay.
And that's actually for competition to ward off other males.
Okay.
They nip each other in the tails or whatnot.
Okay.
So it's kind of a hierarchy thing.
Okay.
And the females don't have that. They just have a regular standard trout. That's
pretty universal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, I guess most of the fish that are released then are females. Overall.
Okay. That's true in a sense, but there's I guess misunderstanding of a triploided trout, a sterile trout. They think they're all females, and they're really not.
It's not Jurassic Park.
They still, no, it's not Jurassic Park. I love Jurassic Park.
I watched that with my nephew for the first time for him last Friday, and he just loved it.
Yeah. I love some Jurassic Park.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, they're almost a little prehistoric looking.
Okay.
The males are. But they can still develop male and female. They're still male and female. They're just sterile.
Okay.
Either way, overall. So that's a misunderstanding about triploid trout. They think they're all females. Now, somehow or another, Trout Lodge is an egg supplier, one of the biggest ones in the industry right now. And when you order from them, they guarantee all female eggs. They say they grow faster and they're all sterile. You can get them sterile. But they take pride in saying they're all females. So, yeah, that's true in that sense because they have artificial intelligence, AI, machine that goes through in the egg picking process and pops the males out. They can tell. Now, how they can do that is beyond me. It's new technology.
All right.
But they're all females.
I'll be darned.
Yep.
So, you're still renovating, you're still building the trout farm?
Yep, the trout farm, when we go down there, keep in mind it has set for 8 years.
Yeah.
Is the time period. So going in there, I've cleaned it up the best I can. I still have some paint to do.
Yeah.
So it's not cosmetically beautiful, but it is a functioning farm, and it is clean to a standpoint of I clean the tanks. There's no silty sediment, just fish waste water that they sit in. That is not good for a trout fry. You have to daily clean.
Right.
Sometimes I clean twice a day.
Yeah.
If you leave any kind of waste or anything with a smaller fish, they'll get what's called bacterial gill disease. And that is treatable, but that's very deadly for them, very lethal. They get all that bacteria in their gills and they can't breathe, and it's really sad.
Yeah.
So, cleanliness is a very good thing, and the constant rotation of cleaning, especially after a storm. I get all that silt come in, sit down to go pull the standpipe. Just brush it down and then put it back. Stand.
Are you need to do any cleaning today? Or
no, I did that this morning.
Okay.
I like to do that early in the morning when the temperatures are down. It's not as stressful for the fish.
Gotcha.
When the temperatures get up, you have to be careful. So there's a good practice. You want to have everything done by about noon. That's probably a good rule of thumb.
Fair enough.
In the trout industry. Now, on a colder day when the temperatures are down, I could feed all day long,
Yeah.
or any time during the day. Should I say not all day long, but when the temperatures are up and they're getting in the 60s or so, you just don't you want to be careful.
Gotcha. And what do you hope to do in the future with High Valley Trout Farms in North Carolina?
High Valley Trout Farm, I want to carry on Charlie Ziegler's legacy. I want to kind of stay what they call old school as possible. I want to bring some technology in, not very much. I'm not willing to expand to liquid oxygen. Liquid oxygen is what they call LHO, lower head oxygen, and it essentially goes through like a cheese grater looking box. The holes are in the top, and liquid oxygen comes from a tank and pumps in, and it super saturates the water to 100%. If you keep your densities low enough, which you can hold twice as much fish or 3 times the amount of fish that you could on regular water, I want to go with what nature gives me here.
Yeah.
I want to stay as natural as I can. I see problems with LHOs. Liquid oxygen can be a good thing, and then it can be a bad thing. When you double your amount of fish that's not natural, they can get all kinds of diseases, and you can run into all kinds of problems. I don't think my cost of income will ever justify the need for it either, of the rotation. Anyways, because it's pretty pricey. It can be a couple grand or so a week or 2 weeks, when the air gas comes in and fills it up.
Yep.
The only oxygen I'll probably ever use is on the trucks. You'll have to for hauling.
Yep.
My hauling tanks will probably have compressed oxygen to start with, and the reason being is liquid oxygen has to blow off every so often so it doesn't explode.
Yeah.
And when the temperatures get up, it has to blow off and let off that gas. And when it does, it eventually blows off altogether, and then I would have to run to Asheville or something to fill up. So compressed oxygen, I got the tank filled, and then after a stock run, I could get it filled, and it'll last until the next time.
Nice. Okay.
And so you want about, I guess, 1 liter. You'll have a flow meter, and it'll have it's just like a medical flow meter of oxygen, and you'll have a little bead in it. And what that bead is, if you put it on 3, is I think 3 liters of oxygen. And when that 3 liters of oxygen goes through a diffuser stone, which bubbles and puts the oxygen in the water, which is steel, so it's not like the tanks when you're hauling. It's not like tanks where you have that overflow and that oxygen coming down like almost a waterfall effect or whatnot. When you're hauling, you say you have 300 gallons of water, you want one liter of oxygen per 100 gallons of water.
Okay.
So if you're on 3 at the bead, then you have 3 liters. You have 300 gallons of water.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Well, do you think should we go take a look around?
Sounds good to me. That's the best part.
All right.
We're more of outside type people here anyway, so we love being outside. We don't have an office. That's why I set up this little bit so we can sit here and talk and interview. We're actually, you almost have to live on a trout farm because it is a constant 24/7 job. Yeah. My wife, who owns the trout farm, I manage it, Dustin Shore. She is the granddaughter of Charlie Ziegler.
Okay.
So yeah, that's I guess what you would call a 3rd generation trout farmer.
Yeah, yeah.
And she helps a lot. When I'm at work, she goes and checks on those fish.
Excellent.
And she's learning a lot. And if she has any questions, she'll call me at work, and I can walk her through just about whatever. And she's come a long way too. We're learning this together. And she stays at home full time. She is a full-time homemaker. Awesome. And she keeps everything going here. And she's quite the business lady.
Awesome. Awesome.
So she takes care of me, and she takes care of the farm.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. Yeah. Let's take a look
around.